Hello, my name is Elliot and this is Freelance Duck Hunting. Is there really a chance that waterfowl hunting could be banned in this country? We're going to talk all about that, but before we get to it, I just want to let you know, thank you for being here on this channel. I've got some hats. If you're looking for some FDH gear, I've got this one. I've got the camo one. You can get those at the flywayscollective.com. Either one of those hats. I'm running out of this one, so you might want to grab one quick if it's something you want. Now, if you want to support me, but you don't want to get a hat or anything, the best way you can do it is just by hitting that subscribe button. Would love to have you as a part of the Freelance Duck Hunting subscriber base. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button now. Also, man, we're off to an awesome start this year. I will put at the end of this video a playlist to all of my actual duck hunts during this season, so you can check those out if you haven't had a chance to do that. So let's go ahead and jump into this. Now, every time I talk about this topic, whether it's on the Duck Gun podcast, which I'm a partner with Jordan Fromer from Duck Gun Chronicles, that can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all of that Duck Gun podcast. Or anytime I put out a video where I'm doing anything that's critical about the waterfowl hunting community, there's a lot of people that don't like that. They think hunters ought to stick together. And I totally agree. Hunters should stick together. But this topic is one that is serious and it needs to be addressed. So I thought it was worthy of doing a whole video on the topic. So here we go. The Humane Society, a few years ago, quite a while, about 20 years ago, they put out an article that I ran across, and it is called Humane Society to Hunters, Clean Up Your Act. And I'm just going to read a little bit about this and talk about it. And I'm hoping my goal from this video is that those of you that maybe are a little sloppy with what you're doing out there, you'll clean things up and we can put a better perception out on the public eye. That's the whole goal. We want to improve the waterfowl hunting community. And we want to make absolutely sure that we're not doing anything that gives anti-hunters any kind of ammunition. So let's clean it up a little bit. So here we go. This came from BrainerDispatch.com. I will put a link to that in the description. So if you want to see the entire article, you can do that. Like I said, now this came out from the early 2000s, so this is a little bit dated, but it's still a prominent topic worthy of discussion. So the Humane Society, they released a scientific report, and they claimed that 60% of all ducks and geese that are ever hit by a pellet are crippled and eventually suffer a painful death. So they're saying 60% of all birds, all waterfowl that take any kind of shot are lost and die. Now, the spokesperson at that time was Bette Stallman, and she said that the Humane Society has plans to use this report to increase public awareness of the problem and to influence changes in the hunting regulations for the good of the resource. Now, she admitted that their ultimate goal is to ban waterfowl hunting. And they've been able to do this in Australia in some parts and also parts of Europe. So we're already seeing this in some other places in the world where they are actually being able to ban waterfowl hunting. I don't know if you've watched what's going on in Australia, but you see on opening day, you see huge protests and massive people out in the marsh. It's a big deal.
In Victoria, the duck hunting season has begun, with shooters and conservationists again facing off over the controversial issue. The practice is banned in New South Wales, Queensland and Western Australia.
A new hunting season begins with renewed attempts to stop the shooting.
And if you don't think this can come to America, well, you're crazy, because it can. It can. So she admitted that their goal is to ban waterfowl hunting. So we realize that that's not going to happen overnight. So what they plan on doing is they're saying if hunters don't clean up their act, we're going to force them to do it. And they're going to try to use administrative pressure, public pressure, and in some cases, legal action. So they also go on to cite a report that was done by Tom Roster of the Cooperative North American Shotgunning Education Program. Now, Tom Roster's a hunter. He's on our side. And he has been the main researcher of shotgun shells. Once they went from lead to steel, he's considered probably the best expert in the country as far as steel loads, effectively killing birds that you shoot at. He does shooting clinics. So him and his organization, the Cooperative North American Shooting Education Program, they did research from 1968 to 1982, and they actually went out and observed 100,000 hunters They trained people to go out and observe. And their study showed a crippling rate of about 25 to 30% of geese. Now, that's not the 60% that the Humane Society was stating. It's 25 to 30%. But it's a shameful number. And Tom Rosher goes on to say it's a shameful number, and we've got to work together to do something about this number. So the overall goal that Concept would like to see hunters work towards is 10%. Now, the survey shows, they did a big survey, and they showed that the non-hunting public won't really complain about a 10% crippling rate. So that would mean if you shoot 10 birds, or let's say you shoot 10 birds, one of them gets away and it's crippled, right? That's a lot better than what we're seeing now, 25 to 30%. So if you kill 100%, if you kill 100 ducks, now I'm not saying you actually retrieve, but if you shoot at, let's say you shoot at and put pellets into 100 ducks, 25 to 30 of them are not retrieved and just go away crippled. And this organization is looking for a 10% rate. Now I can tell you on my Freelance Hunt Stats site, we keep track of crippled birds. So Concept is saying if hunters can get the ratio down to 10%, then no one's really going to try to put a flashlight on us. No one's going to try to put a spotlight on the hunting community and say this is a problem, this needs to be handled. 10% is kind of the goal that we're going to. Now, Mr. Rosser also conducted shooting tests with wildlife officials from 15 Concept member states, and the gunners shot at banded semi-tame ducks that would return to their pens even if they were struck by a pellet. So they set up these simulated shoots with these semi-trained ducks, and in that test, it was about 20 to 30% of the birds that came back to the pen had shot in it and were wounded. So it kind of reiterated what the study was, that it kind of reinforced that the study was accurate. It's about that 20 to 30%. So after they ran these initial shot tests with these pen raised ducks, they took these shooters through some kind of clinics and gave them some advice on shot selection and gunning, helped them to improve their shooting. And actually, the second test that they ran, the number was about 10%. So the good news is that as hunters, we can absolutely improve these numbers, and we can do a better job. So the Concept organization, they put out 15 reasons that birds are wounded. And it's a pamphlet. I'm going to put a link to the pamphlet in the description, also to all 15. I'm just going to go over a few of them that kind of stuck out to me. So here, Concept put out 15 reasons that they feel like birds are typically wounded. And I'm just going to share some of these with you. I will put the entire link in the description again, so you can go look at them all. I picked out the ones that kind of stuck out with me. These are ways, as the waterfowl hunting community, kind of the reasons there's so many wounded and what we can do to improve that. So the first one is shooting skills as a part of a hunter. I think that everyone would have guessed that. They did a shooting test. Now this blew my mind. This blew my mind. They did a shooting test with 25,000 shotgunning hunters, and only 50% of the 25,000 could hit 6 out of 8 clay targets at 20 yards. Only 50%. 15%, only 15% could hit 6 out of 8 from 30 yards. So at 20 yards, it was 50% of people were proficient, 6 to 8. 30 yards, only 15% of hunters were proficient, 6 out of 8 clays. Only 14 individuals have accomplished hitting 6 out of 8 at 40 yards. So out of 25,000, now honestly, I will say this, because you're probably thinking the same thing. You're like, whatever, I don't buy that. That one's a little hard to swallow. Only 14 people out of 25,000 hit 6 out of 8 from 40 yards. That one's a little hard to take. But even if that number, for whatever reason, isn't right, I think we can agree that there's a lot of people that are not proficient hunters, shotgunners at 40 yards, whether it's 14 or even if the number had been 400. The vast majority of people don't hit consistently at 40 yards. So that was a test they did, 25,000 shotgunners. So your shooting skill being one of them. We've got to become better shotgunners. Get out to the range. Practice at clays. Practice. When you're shooting clays, know the distance that you're shooting. Even if you got one of those hand throwers, you and your buddies get out there with those hand throwers. Start at 20 yards, 30 yards, 40 yards. Practice these things. Practice the side shots. Another one is using the wrong load. If you're using the wrong ammunition, if you're using the wrong choke, it's going to increase your wounded birds, obviously. And shooting beyond maximum distance, capable of meeting minimum pattern density. Now, I have talked a lot, especially on the Duck Gun podcast, about different chokes. I use a modified. During teal season, sometimes I've even used an improved. And during big duck season, I use a modified. I never go beyond a modified because my shot selection is extremely, extremely conservative. Now, I will say this. If you are ever going to shoot beyond 40 yards or 45 yards, 45 would be the maximum you would want to shoot for a modified. If you ever want to shoot beyond that, use a full choke. I'm not a full choke proponent because I believe in getting them in close, and the best chokes for getting birds inside of 40 yards is modified or improved. That's scientifically proven. They've done tests. It's just how it is. But that being said, it is better to shoot a full choke in close than an improved or modified out far. All right. It is more ethical to shoot that full choke in close than to shoot an improved or modified beyond 45. Because if you're shooting an improved or modified out at 50, 55 yards, you are wounding and crippling birds that you don't even know about. So if you have problems with your gunning distance, if you have problems taking bad shots you shouldn't take, by all means, use that full choke. But so I'm not going to say anything more about that. I've talked a lot about that on the podcast, though. But make sure that you've got the right ammunition and the right chokes. And ammunition, for steel, your big ducks, you're talking 2s, 3s, or 4s. If you're talking bismuth, 5s or 6s for big ducks at that gunning range. All right, another one. And again, shooting beyond the maximum personal shooting skills distance. Get to know how good you are. Now, I'm going to be brutally honest at this. When I first started waterfowl hunting, one of the reasons why I am so conservative and Fumble Mitts are so conservative about our shot selection is that we are not great shots outside of 40 yards. We're just not. And so I learned early on that I was going to cripple too many birds between 40 and 50, 55. So I trimmed up my shot selection. I consider myself a very average shooter. I am left eye dominant, so I've got to close one eye. So I would not do well in Clay's shooting contest. Now I am very proficient inside of 20 and 30, 35 yards. I'm about a 50% shooter, so I could meet that 30-yard, 50% shooter criteria, but at 40 yards, I probably would not. So know what your range is and don't shoot beyond it. Now, this one was interesting. Last one I'm going to talk about. It says that more than 2 hunters shooting simultaneously is one of the major reasons for crippled waterfowl. So when this happens, there is a tendency when you're shooting with more than 2 hunters and you see those double A frames, 8 guys, everyone just loading into a flock, a couple birds draining out of it. When there's that many guys shooting, you have a more of a tendency to just spray shot rather than aiming at a specific bird. And so now it's super annoying. Spray and pray mentality is code word for just shoot and hope something falls. Don't worry about your shot selection. You got 8 guys out there hunting and you see someone say, hey, it's kind of far. Should we take it? 8 guns unload. Couple birds drop out of it. How many birds in that flock do you think are flying away with steel? So the spray and pray mentality is listed by this organization as one of the 15 factors as to why we have too many wounded birds. So spray and pray is garbage. Take ethical shots. Now, I'm not going to say, if you got a group of 4 or 5, obviously you're going to have more than 2 or 3 people shooting at a time. Know your target and specifically shoot at it. Do not flock shoot. And flock shooting is very difficult not to do. If you got 15 to 100 birds coming in, you've got to be laser focused to pick out that bird and take that bird. And I'll just leave you with a final shot. For me personally, what can I do? And that's what I hope that you guys do is, what can you do to cripple less birds? For me personally, I know I don't need to be shooting outside of 45 because I'm using a modified choke. If you use a modified choke, you should never shoot outside of 45. For me personally, I'm going to be very, very conservative about my shot selection. And I am not going to pull the third shot as the duck comes in, right? Shot 1, shot 2. A lot of times that third shot is flying away. Hold off on that shot. Don't take that third shot. That third shot, when they're, flying away from you, you're like, man, I just want to get it, right? let that shot go. Don't take it. So for me personally, that's what I am going to do to lessen the number of cripples that I produce out hunting. You know, in America right now, there's not a big push for banning waterfowl hunting. There's not. But we know the climate can change very quickly. Look what's happened during this pandemic with all of the riots and the social justice warriors. And things can turn like that. Australia, they're doing it. Some places in Europe, and they're doing it. And if you don't think that they can come to America and all of a sudden start talking about reducing season, reducing limits, banning different places, they absolutely can do that. And they're absolutely willing to do that. So what are you going to do to make sure there's less wounded birds? That's what I want you to think about. So I hope that this has been informative to you guys. I know it's been a video that I really enjoy doing. I'm really passionate about this topic. Get them in close, take clean shots, get a dog, find your wounded birds. Anyway, so that's all I got today. Remember, I got the hats. Both these are at the flywayscollective.com. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to have another video out here in a couple days, so be ready for that. I will talk to you later.